Okay, here's a quick review of the digestion absorption, the material that we may have a test on Wednesday if we don't have a snow day. I think we'll still have it on Wednesday. However, so let's start with nutrition. We talked about nutrients and minerals. When we talk about nutrition, we can actually talk about ingestion, digestion, absorption, and egestion. And ingestion is just getting stuff in your mouth, just basically stuffing your face, putting that hamburger in the old pie hole, or if you're a chicken pecking at stuff, or if you're this little guy, it's all the same. Ingesting is just getting the food in. And in our case, it's the mouth. And speaking of the mouth, that's where we start with digestion. And digestion is just basically breaking down food so it's small enough that it can be absorbed into either the circulatory system of the blood or the circulatory system of the lymphatic system. A little redundant, but let's start with the mouth. So the mouth is pretty straightforward. We have two types of digestion, the chewing, grinding, mechanical digestion with your teeth, and then we also have some chemical digestion, and a bunch of cool things inside there too to look at. Well, in terms of chemical digestion, we're just going to concentrate on your salivary glands. Now, we do have three pair, but I just want you to know that they're salivary glands. And the salivary glands make saliva. And saliva has a basic function of lubricating the food and moistening it, and also adding some enzymes. And there's a great shot of some saliva. And in our case, salivary amylase is the one enzyme I want you to remember. And this breaks down starches into simple sugars. And usually when you see an ACE like that, you think of an enzyme. When you see OS, as you know, you think of a carbohydrate. Next structure to talk about very quickly is esophagus. And as you know, the esophagus connects the back of the throat, the pharynx, down to the tummy, the stomach. And this is how the food travels down. And you might remember also that it travels down via peristalsis, which is that wave-like contraction that moves starting from your esophagus all the way to the very end. When I mean the end, I mean the very end. And this peristalsis moves through your esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and large intestine. And you might recall that at the beginning of your esophagus, there's two choices for your food to go down. Only one good choice. If it gets down into the trachea, you start choking on it. And if it goes down the esophagus, good deal. And we have that epiglottis, that little flap that kind of protects your food from going down, quote unquote, the wrong way. Okay, once the food enters into the stomach, we have another type of digestion occurring. And here's the top of the esophagus here, and it goes right down into your stomach. And your stomach has an entirely different environment. It's very, very acidic, very low pH because of the hydrochloric acid. And we also produce some enzymes. And the only enzyme I want you to know is pepsin. And pepsin begins with P. Proteins begin with P. And that's because pepsin breaks down proteins. And the hydrochloric acid helps kind of soften and break down some of the proteins. And this is an enzyme that works best in a really acidic environment. And as you might recall also that the stomach is very, very muscular. There's actually three layers of muscles in different directions, which really give it a lot of strength. And if you've ever thrown up, you know things come hurling out of there at a pretty fast speed. And that's because of so much how muscular it is. So it's chemical digestion to a certain extent and muscular digestion because it's churning and breaking things down. And when things leave the small intestine, of course, here's the beginning of leave the stomach, here is the beginning of the small intestine. And the reason we call it small, of course, is not because of the length, because it is quite long, maybe 15 feet or so in humans, but because of the diameter. And compared to the large intestine here, you can see that a much smaller diameter. Now, the small intestine is really the workhorse of your digestive system. It breaks down all the different types of food, whether it be proteins, the fats and oils, the lipids, or the carbohydrates. But you remember also in conjunction with the small intestine, we have the liver, the pancreas, and the gallbladder. And they connect right into the beginning of the small intestine via duct, an opening which, again, empties in right about there. Now, when we talk about the liver and the pancreas, these are essentially accessory organs, or accessory glands, really. And the gallbladder holds the materials that the liver produces. And that material is bile. And bile has one function that has to help kind of what's called emulsify. But really what it does is it breaks down the big chunks of fat into smaller chunks of fat. And therefore, when you have these smaller pieces, you have more surface area, and therefore the enzymes can work better. The pancreas produces a whole host of enzymes. I only dealt with a few of them. One that shows up again is amylase, the same enzyme that was in your mouth, which breaks down the starches. It also produces sodium bicarbonate, which is a natural kind of base which kind of neutralizes the acid. Because remember, all the stuff coming out of the stomach is coming in the small intestine, very acidic, and we want to neutralize that. And that's what sodium bicarbonate does. And the other one is lipase. And lipase, as the name implies, breaks down lipids. And there's the ACE again, indicating that it's an enzyme. So the pancreas produces more than these actually, but these are the only three I want you to know. And again, they all come in together here at the same point into the small intestine. And that's pretty much for the digestion part, at least as we're going to be covering for this class. So again, the mouth is only the starches being broken down, so carbohydrates. Not much is happening in the esophagus. It shoots on through. When it comes emptying into the stomach, it's pretty much proteins. And then the small intestine really breaks down everything. The second part of this big umbrella of nutrition is absorption. And absorption just means now that the food's broken down small enough, it has to get reabsorbed, or excuse me, say absorbed into your bloodstreams or your lymphatic system. And this is what the small intestine, the other part of the small intestine does. And these would be blood vessels and or lymphatic vessels, which are headed or kind of embedded inside your small intestine. So the food that gets digested gets absorbed into these. And this is accomplished by structures called the villi and then the microvilli. And all they do is they create a lot of surface area. So the villi here are like little finger-like projections inside your small intestine where the materials gets absorbed in. And then if you look really closely on the surface, each of these little cells actually have little small invaginations, which we call the microvilli. And this is an amazing amount of surface area, all kinds of nooks and crannies for things to be absorbed. Here's a really cool electron micrograph of here's the villi and breaking it down smaller and smaller so you can see how much surface area there really is. So small intestine absorption, so that's where the food that you've broken down via digestion gets absorbed. And lastly, but not least, is the large intestine. And large intestine starts here where we don't have a small intestine added onto it, but it moves up and over and down, hence ascending, transverse, and descending colon. And here's a little better picture of it. I think we saw this already, but you can kind of get a better feel for it. And the large intestine really has not too much to do with digestion as opposed to a couple other major functions, which is this is where most of the water from your digestive juices and secretions get reabsorbed. Otherwise, you'd be dehydrated in no time. It also kind of compacts the material to be ejected out the end, so to speak. And it also houses a lot of bacteria, which are very beneficial in terms of breaking down some of the foods that we can't get, but also it's providing us with some vitamins, and vitamin K is one of them that it helps kind of metabolize a little bit better for us, and it helps us with absorption. And last but not least is egestion, and egestion is not excretion. Excretion is getting rid of metabolic waste, so that when you break down sugars and things and carry out respiration, we give off CO2, which is a waste, water is a waste essentially, but egestion is getting rid of materials that we cannot digest, things like fiber, or things that didn't get digested all the way through or partially digested. So egestion really isn't excretion again. It's things that have gone through your digestive system which you can't digest, or you just didn't get around to digesting them in time. And I think that's a kind of quick overview. That gives you most of the parts and pieces of the digestive system.